All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome in. So the Jets have officially moved on from Aaron Rodgers, right? They have confirmed that. Woody Johnson had a statement. Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji, also a statement there. We know that it's over. But what we don't know is what direction the Jets will travel down in regards to the quarterback position in 2025, right? It's a huge position, of course, because of positional value, but also because there's so many different options. How many? We're in February right now, and think about how many different options we've heard: Sam Darnold, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor, Jordan Travis, Jackson Dart, Kyle McCord. It's just name after name after name. Hendon Hooker, Sam Howell potentially. What happens if one of these teams maybe move on from someone who we're not really expecting? One name I keep seeing people talk about is Geno Smith in Seattle. I don't think they move off of him, but it just speaks to the fact that there's just tons of options out there. There's just a lot of speculation at this point in time. But in this one, I wanted to really ask you the question, is there a chance that one of the two top quarterback prospects, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, falls to the Jets at spot number 7? This is a totally valid question, but to have that, and really why, of course, we're only focusing on those two, is because there's a pretty significant drop off after those two, just as quarterback prospects are concerned. But we have to take a look at the teams in front of the New York Jets to really try to get a clearer picture on what's going to happen. So, you're looking at a lot of the mock drafts. A lot of them have Tennessee going number 1 with a quarterback, which I think I would probably go in that direction as well. But I want to say over this last week, or maybe really since the Super Bowl, we're seeing a lot of different mock drafts come out where it's Abdul Carter going number 1, where it's Travis Hunter going number 1 overall. Is there a world where the Titans pass on a QB and address quarterback in free agency or some other facet, right? I think when we take a look at the Tennessee Titans and analyze where they're currently at as a franchise, they're in a bit of a weird spot, right? Because you have a first-year GM, Mike Borgonzi, widely known as the number 1 general manager candidate out there. They brought him in. Where was he coming from? Kansas City, right? Then you have the head coach, Brian Callahan, who comes over from Cincinnati and, in my opinion, had a really disappointing first year. Of course, first year, he's rolling out Will Levis, but I felt like there were just a lot of mistakes along the way. A lot of just questionable comments in press conferences. I did not like the development plan for Will Levis. You could also look at the team's just aggressive approach in free agency with, of course, Rand Carthen. Let's go out and get L'Jarius Sneed. Let's go out and sign Calvin Ridley to all this money. Sign Pollard at running back. This team made a lot of offseason moves. I was expecting the Titans to have, or at least be better than the worst team in football. Come on. Like, there's too much talent there to be the worst team in football. 3 wins. Geez. So there's a lot of pressure on Callahan to compete and perform, or at least show something on the offensive side of the football. And you can of course play the blame game, whether it's the right side of the offensive line, whether it's Will Levis, the development, the play calling, the game planning. Like, there's of course a lot of blame to go around. But when you look at the Tennessee Titans and we start talking about new options, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, I think both options make sense for the Titans. Now, I think it's funny because from one angle, I think if you look at it from Callahan's perspective, who's the better system fit for what Callahan wants to do? I think that's Sanders. Who maybe has the higher floor, right? In other words, who could come in and perform right away? Or that's the expectation. Shedeur Sanders. From that aspect, coach on the hot seat, quarterback that can maybe play or is a little bit more polished, that can step in and have success, who fits the system better. You're thinking Shedeur Sanders, okay, yeah, he's going to get the nod over Cam Ward, but who's the GM? Mike Borgonzi. Alex from Hail Mary Sports pointed this out. We were talking about the number 1 overall pick last week, and he made a really, really good point. Borgonzi's coming in from KC with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes was labeled as that raw prospect coming out of Texas Tech who, yes, of course, he was impressive. Yes, of course, he had physical measurables, but it was the ceiling. It was the potential that was so enamoring with Mahomes. And Cam Ward, I'm not comparing him to Pat Mahomes, right? Obviously, but he's similar in the sense where it's like, hey, if he can get in and get developed, have some time to maybe sit and learn the NFL game, all of a sudden, I mean, you can be looking at a really high-end quarterback, again, if developed the right way. And if Borgonzi, is I mean, he's spent his entire career with the Chiefs. He could be looking at Cam Ward and, Callahan, a head coach, and it's like, I'm going to take the quarterback that I like more. That's just the bottom line. And if Callahan can't make it work, I'm just going to, hire the next head coach the following offseason. I do feel like that is a possibility. I don't see Mike Borgonzi maybe opting for the option that's better for the short term as opposed for the long term in year one of his new general manager job, where he's never been a general manager before. First crack at it. So I definitely feel like the Titans will take one of them, but you can argue, okay, what about Sam Darnold? Does Sam Darnold make sense for the Titans? Could Borgonzi, could Callahan look at this quarterback class and say, hey, you know what? It's not that great. Especially for, like a franchise-changing player, the number one overall pick in the draft. Could we just go out and sign a guy in Sam Darnold, plug him in, someone who would fit the Callahan system, and go out and just go BPA, Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, go out and get a stud there. And now it's two birds with one stone. Because you got to imagine Sam Darnold's going to be a significant upgrade over a Will Levis, and would also come in and have more success, maybe early on compared to a Sanders and Cam Ward. Could that be the route that they decide to go down? One thing I've seen a lot is Aaron Rodgers possibly going to Tennessee, even though like the timelines don't really make sense at all. You have like the Chad Brinker connection. The Titans were one of the favorites before the Jets landed him. Supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but the rumor is Aaron Rodgers loves Tennessee. He has a house in Tennessee and was eyeing the Titans as a potential option. Again, I have no idea if that's true or not. Personally, I feel like it will end up coming down to Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, or Sam Darnold for the Tennessee Titans. Next up, we have the Cleveland Browns, and the Browns are interesting, right? Because this team desperately needs a quarterback, but yet you're looking at the mock drafts, and no one's really talking about the Browns selecting one at spot number 2, even though they can go land one of the top 2 guys. Why is that the case? Because Kevin Stefanski has shown no indication that he's willing to build a system around a quarterback. It is his system, and he wants a quarterback that can fit it, right? I mean, the team went out and traded just a ginormous package for Deshaun Watson, made him the highest paid player in, at the time, NFL history, all the guaranteed money for him to say, here's my system, you run it. Would he do that with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, someone who is unproven? Probably not. So unless Stefanski feels good about either one of those two guys, I just find it very, very hard to look at Stefanski and say, hey, you know what? There is a sense of maybe his time in Cleveland coming to an end. If things don't go well, the team can move on. Maybe Stefanski would want to move on from Cleveland, get out of that situation. Who knows how it's going to play out, but does Stefanski want to tie potentially his last season in Cleveland or the season to, propel him to a longer deal to a rookie quarterback? So that's why there's a lot of speculation. Okay, maybe a Sam Darnold, maybe a Derek Carr, maybe a Kirk Cousins with Cleveland, someone who's proven, someone who can step in and win games, run the offense efficiently. I mean, you're thinking about the Stefanski offense. They had bright spots with Jameis Winston. They had bright spots the year prior with Joe Flacco making it to the playoffs. Now, of course, the Browns cap situation isn't the best, but there's things that you can do. There's rumors about a Myles Garrett trade, where if you move off of him and the acquiring team takes on a full deal, they'll clear, I think, right around that $19 million mark. Deshaun Watson, of course, has the injury. He's a $72 million cap hit. And I've heard a rumor that there could be some sort of thing in the contract suggesting that if Deshaun Watson misses an extended period of time, like an X amount of time, then Cleveland could get a huge chunk of that money back. So Cleveland's an interesting one, but you got to imagine if they trade Myles Garrett, Abdul Carter would be in play if he's not selected number 1 overall with Tennessee. So next up, we have the New York Giants at spot number 3, and I definitely feel like one is coming off the board here. Cam Ward, I feel like, is the better fit for what Brian Daboll wants to do on the offensive side of the football. You, of course, look at the Josh Allen comparison, right, where Allen was considered a raw prospect, not as raw as maybe a Patrick Mahomes because he did come out of the pro-style system, with, of course, Craig Bowl back at Wyoming. But, Cam Ward is someone who does have a lot of college experience. He's played in a lot of football games. And because of that just increased mobility, the increased playmaking ability, we've seen Brian Daboll develop a quarterback like that before. And again, Josh Allen. So to me, I do feel like Cam makes more sense than Sanders with the Giants. Now, you could also argue, okay, well, does Darnold make sense there? Does Matt Stafford make sense there? There's like these small rumblings that Stafford could be in play with the Giants. Personally, I'm not really investing too much into that just because the fit just bother. I feel like there's a lot of holes on that Giants team. I don't really like that fit. But ultimately, I do believe that the Giants will draft one of these two quarterbacks with spot number 3. Now, the Patriots don't need a quarterback at 4. The Jags don't need a quarterback at 5. The Vegas Raiders definitely need a quarterback at spot number 6. And Sanders is constantly, I feel like Sanders was linked to the Raiders going into this season at Colorado, right? Like he likes the Raiders. You have that Tom Brady comparison, and of course, you look at Shedeur Sanders as a prospect. He's a win from the pocket type of guy. He really does a good job of just beating teams in all 3 phases of the field, right? Short game, intermediate, deep part. He can really throw. He's a dart thrower, right? He throws accurate passes. And that's kind of, again, it's going to sound crazy. I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady at all, but he doesn't rely on his natural playmaking ability all the time. Like that's not his first go-to option. He's not a running quarterback. He again, win from the pocket. One thing I love about Shedeur Sanders, by the way, is his ability to climb the pocket, step up into the pocket, and keep his eyes down the field despite how many times he got hit and sacked with the Buffaloes. Now, you did start to see some negative tendencies there because of it, but it didn't go completely off the rails like Hackenberg coming out of Penn State, where his eyes are just dropping down looking at the rush, and he's just kind of trying to avoid guys. Sanders, again, despite the frame, despite the amount of times that he got hit, he's not afraid. He's a very, I would say, mentally strong individual, and he's tough. You never saw Sanders, he's out for 8 weeks, he's out for, a month, dealing with this, dealing with that. No, he's getting hit, but he's getting up every time and he's finishing games and he's forcing his way out there every single week. If Cam Ward is on the board for the Raiders, I also think that makes a lot of sense, right? The Raiders are kind of in this weird spot where they have a lot of, good, solid young players in the mix. Of course, Brock Bowers. You can talk about Powers Johnson on the offensive line. Like the Raiders do have like a nice young core. Cam Ward, I feel like, slides perfectly into that Raiders team. Ideally, you'd want Cam Ward to sit a little bit, maybe sit for 5, 6, 7 weeks on the bench first. And now if they decide to throw him out there early, that's just, I feel like, the norm with NFL teams these days. But, you're looking at that offense. It's Chip Kelly, Cam Ward, assuming Chip Kelly runs the same, like something similar to what we saw back at Ohio State. Man, Cam Ward in that offense would be really, really fun to watch, especially with guys like Bowers. Maybe they drafted Judkins in the mid rounds, right? That another explosive player there. So I do feel like the Raiders make a lot of sense. But here is the interesting twist. You look at the Las Vegas Raiders cap situation. Where do they stand? Second in football. What, 89, 90, 90-ish to up to $95 million in cap space? Are you kidding me? So much cap space. I could see Pete Carroll saying, hey, you know what? Sam Darnold's out there. We can go out there and pay Sam Darnold, $35, $40 million a season on a 3-year, 4-year deal. Get him in the mix. Still have over $40 million left over to address other needs. And that now opens up the possibility of going just BPA or best, maybe a Ted McMillan at spot number 6, maybe Will Johnson. Maybe, the options are really endless, I feel, for the Raiders. But now all of a sudden you don't have that quarterback need. You're not pressed if a quarterback falls. You're not sitting there worrying about, okay, please, we got to trade up or one of these guys has to fall. The need's already handled. So, I don't know. I think, oh, by the way, Russell Wilson rumors could rejoin Pete Carroll. Does Justin Fields go there if Russell re-signs with Pittsburgh? If Pittsburgh goes with, Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold, does Fields wind up with the Raiders? There's a lot of moving parts here, but the Raiders, to me, are the big domino piece. The Raiders, because, again, I just don't see them saying, okay, we have $80, $90 million in space. With Pete Carroll at this age, signing a 3-year deal, Brady first year in the mix as a true decision maker for that Raiders team and saying, yeah, we're not going to do anything with it. I just don't feel like that's. I think they're going to make a splash or two. And then, of course, we get to the New York Jets. Right now, I do believe if Cam Ward is on the board or Shedeur Sanders is on the board, the Jets would really, really think about it. And I could very well see something like this happening, right? Where Sanders is there, maybe Ward's gone, Ward's there, maybe Sanders is gone. And the Jets are like, you know what? We weren't really expecting this. We're going to pull the trigger here. And the Jets are kind of in a weird spot because, you can, like, Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back, so he's off the board. Sam Darnold, I highly doubt he would even consider coming back to the Jets. Kirk Cousins on a 1-year deal. To me, that's not the answer. Derek Carr on a 1-year deal, perhaps. Justin Fields, does he really fit the system? I feel like maybe Fields would want to go other places like the Raiders or the Steelers. I think probably the Steelers make the most sense for Justin. Then, you're looking at the current roster, Tyrod Taylor, Jordan Travis. But Jordan Travis, we haven't even heard one thing about him. As far as his practice, the only thing we've heard about Travis is that he had a pretty significant setback with his injury. That's the only update we've gotten on Jordan Travis. Unfortunately. Now, I do expect him to be 100%, before training camp, so he's out there competing in somewhat of a quarterback competition, but between Tyrod, maybe another quarterback or two. But again, I do feel like Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn, if a QB is there, we have to imagine it's because other positions are clearly going in front of spot number 7. So maybe a Will Johnson's off the board. Maybe a McMillan is off the board. Maybe a Mason Graham is off the board, right? Is there a right tackle worth taking at spot number 7? I'm going to say no. Is there a safety? I freaking love Malachi Starks, but 7's probably a little too high. Is there a defensive tackle outside of Mason Graham that's worth a top 10 pick? I don't think so. If edge rusher, you can argue, but I just feel like if that's the case and a lot of these players are coming off the board and there's one QB there, the Jets would consider it. Now, out of the two quarterbacks, who makes the most sense for the Jets, right? Ward or Sanders? I think if you're just purely looking at college prospect fitting into the offense, Sanders makes the most sense. If Muji's looking at the team like, hey, we got to go with the biggest upside, Cam Ward makes the most sense. I think if you draft Cam Ward, there has to be an element of building the system around what he's really, really good at. And then also, but I really don't feel like the Jets could go wrong either way. Like just hypothetical, the Jets draft Cam Ward, what would the ideal plan be? For me, you don't play him right away. You do not roll him out there year one, especially with all the roster holes. If Devontae and Lazard leave, which is looking likely, what's the wide receiver room going to be looking like? Pretty thin. Again, right tackle, what's happening there? I feel good about the pretty much four-fifths of the offensive line plus the running back room, and of course Garrett Wilson. But does he have that security blanket in the tight end position? That's another huge team need as well. I think if you draft a Cam Ward and you say, hey, you know what? You are the guy, but you're not going to be the guy right away. You're the future of this franchise. We're going to invest in you as a player, but we're going to roll out Tyrod to start the year off. And you are going to practice and learn and soak up quarterback meetings, offensive meetings, and you're going to really learn how to be a professional. You're going to be developed, and we're going to take our time with you, which is the opposite of what the Jets do every single time they draft a young quarterback outside of Christian Hackenberg, of course, talking in like the first 2 rounds here. Sanchez played early, Geno played early, Darnold played early, Zach played early. And you can argue in both cases with Darnold and Zach, they weren't ready to play right away. So I think that's just such, it's such a big thing with these young quarterbacks. Like I like how the Patriots kind of approached it, like bringing in Jacoby Brissett. Yes, of course, Drake May is the answer here, but we're not going to just throw you to the wolves and just say, save us, please, like the Colts did with Anthony Richardson. You're going to have some time on the bench. You're going to be working hand in hand with a teammate. who has been around the game for a long time, who's learned multiple offenses, who's seen a lot of defenses, who's been in different situations, worked with different coaches, and can help groom you and is not going to be weird about it. Think back like Flacco, Lamar Jackson, that situation was weird. I think that would be a great situation for either Sanders or Cam Ward. But you look at Cam Ward's college just backstory, how he got to this point. There was a lot of adversity, right? 3 different schools, Incarnate Word, Washington State. Looked like he was going to go to the NFL last season, but the word was, 3rd or 4th round pick. So he decides to go back to school, transfers to Miami, and now we're talking about him potentially going number 1 overall. This is someone who's had just a crazy ride in the collegiate game, right? It takes mental toughness. It takes, being a strong-willed, confident guy to get to this point. To constantly bounce around like that. And then, of course, in the case of Shedeur Sanders, again, I do feel like he's a better systematic fit for what Inkstrand wants to do, assuming that the offense is going to look similar, majority-wise to the Detroit Lions offense, where Sanders can just be that dart thrower over the middle of the field, of course, hand the football off. I mean, the deep ball accuracy with Shedeur Sanders, I think, is great, but he also has the legs to extend plays here and there, but he's, traditionally that pocket passer, that drop back guy. He wins from the pocket and he's looking to win from the pocket. Another underrated trait I feel like needs to be talked about specifically with Sanders is that, he's dealt with a lot of pressure, really from a young age, whether it's him being Deion's son, whether it's him being the savior to turn around Colorado with a not so great team, especially in year 1. This is someone who I feel like would come to the New York Jets and not be rattled. I mean, we hear it all the time, ownership issues, media issues, all eyes on you, the lights, the expectations. There's a lot of pressure that comes with being the Jets quarterback. You need to have someone that has thick skin. You need to have someone that can deal with it. In my opinion, Shedeur Sanders has dealt with pressure, again, his entire life. I don't feel like the media size, the team size would be too big for him. I don't think he would be rattled. I mean, we even saw Robert Saleh get rattled by the media and the storylines and what's being said about him and whatnot. I don't think Sanders is going to be scared by stepping into a situation like that. And then the last thing I want to end off on here, right, is what happens if one of the quarterbacks start to fall and maybe the Raiders don't go out and sign Sam Darnold? Could the Jets jump from 7 to 5 with the Jags? The reason why I'm not saying 4 is because it's the New England Patriots. With the Jags at 5, this is a team that can go in a bunch of different directions. They can go out and get Mason Graham. They can go out and get Will Johnson. They can go out and get Ted McMillan. This is a team that can go in they can, brand new GM. We don't know it yet. Brand new head coach, Liam Cohen. The Jags can go in a bunch of different directions and get a lot better. So I feel as though if the Jets want to move up to spot number 5, maybe flip a mid-round pick to jump those 2 spots, they could do that and jump the Raiders. And then, of course, the Raiders would have, their selection with BPA. And the Jags, if the Jags feel good about either, any of those 3 players, now all of a sudden, okay, it makes sense for Jacksonville. They're a young team of the new regime. They're adding another pick, and they're still getting someone that they really, really like. So I also could see, potentially something like that coming into play as well. But anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Really just kind of wanted to rattle through the team set. Look, because it's not just those teams that need a quarterback. Colts maybe, Saints maybe, Steelers maybe. But those teams are behind the Jets, right? They don't dictate how, Ward and Sanders are potentially going to fall. Unless, of course, they trade up, which is very, very real. But the problem is, because there's so much uncertainty with how this thing is going to go, you'd probably have to trade to spot number 2. You'd probably have to get to spot number 2 at least, because would anyone be like truly shocked if QBs went 1 and 2? Like you can sit here and argue Ward or Sanders for the Browns. Like you could do that. It's not off the table. So, if New Orleans wants to trade up, I'm talking before the draft, they're not just going to move up to 5 randomly. Or, they're not going to move up to 4 randomly in hopes of getting a quarterback. Think back when the Jets traded up to spot number 3 with the Colts going from 6 to 3. Why was that the case? Because there were a lot of quarterbacks that the Jets felt really good about. to where, hey, we're gonna land one that we like. So a similar type of mindset I would expect has to happen for a team to trade up pre-draft. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. And as always, go Jets.